So, the translations are out for My Hero Academia Manga Chapter 399, and let's just say that with this chapter, we get a weird flip in perspective to a particular character that actually plays a major role in this chapter, and you'll get to understand what I'm talking about right now. Hey guys, how's it going? It is your boy, Manga Man Drew, and I'm here to talk about the most recent manga chapter for My Hero Academia Manga Chapter 399, titled Organic Alternating Current Lamp. Yeah, this is actually not something within my wheelhouse. I'm not that versed when it comes to engineering, when it comes to AC versus DC, but from that name alone, you could probably get an understanding of what this chapter could be potentially about, specifically when it comes to the organic part. Because in this chapter, we get what we got last chapter, a continuation of the fight between All For One and All Might, where we get to see a little bit more tech from All Might, but we also get a very overarching theme within this chapter when it comes to the light that is no longer inside of All Might and him passing on that light to someone else. And we'll dive into that a little bit more, but let's first go into more of a proper overview of what's going on in this chapter to start off the review. And to start off, the chapter begins pretty much where we left off from, with the building that All Might is on being completely destroyed, where we get to see 4 new pieces of equipment coming from All Might, going from tentacle as well as a combination with floppy suction cups, which apparently gives All Might more mobility as well as the ability to move freely, as well as 2 new pieces that we kind of saw last chapter that get named in this chapter, which includes Tailman and Shota. Once again, all of the equipment that is going on All Might right now are named after the hero names of the students within Class 1A. And something else that we're getting a little bit more understanding about is how this equipment can only really be used with this suit. So any complaints people have with, oh, this technology can be given to other people, no, it can only really be used with the suit, with how it connects with All Might's suit in these moments. And how now that All Might has these different equipments on him, instead of him going on the defensive, he now has to be more offensive, especially with the knowledge that damaging All For One more causes his body to revert faster back to a non-existent state. And how we are once again introduced to the anima crow animals, as All Might plans on getting something from his Hercules car that can really help in the situation, but cannot help as it is right now. And spoilers for what we see in the end of this chapter, this equipment is very, very destructive and really applies to a character that we see in this chapter, as well as another student in Class 1A. But as this is all happening, All For One is doing what All For One typically does. He's ranting and raving and is pretty much trying to taunt and ridicule All Might in this moment by pretty much saying that he's going to defeat All Might while not going full power at all, as we see that certain spikes come out of the wall as All Might tries to dodge them. And then we get to once again see these giant, disgusting mouths coming out of All For One as All Might says, "Wow, you are such a liar," with All For One exclaiming, "Oh wow, this is nothing," as we see these giant monstrous mouths literally eating and trying to eat All Might and the buildings around him, as we eventually get All For One coming around the corner, coming around to the building and saying, "Oh, All Might, oh, because this is being recorded, I'm gonna make sure everyone sees the death of the symbol of peace," as we see that he just punches All Might into the ground. And there's going to be a high chance of people wondering why All For One is going easy on All Might. And it's as All Might said in this chapter, and most likely alluded to in the last chapter, that All For One realizes that the more that he damages his body, the more and faster he rewinds and the younger he gets, which means less time that he would have to get towards Tomura Shigaraki. And because he understands this, you would think that the logical choice would for him to stop chasing All Might and going after Tomura, but he's unable to do it because of the hatred that he feels for All Might. It is clouding his more logical judgment, but not completely impeding it. That's why he elaborates that he's going to do in All Might with these very minimal efforts, because it's to make sure that when he does defeat All Might eventually, maybe, possibly, he could immediately go to Tomura Shigaraki and not actually lose the fight. So basically, he's going easy on All Might, not because he is cocky, which he is, but also to pretty much save the little time that he has with his body rewinding. And even him going easy on All Might and all of this ridicule, we see how destructive he can be in this moment by still being able to heavily damage the suit as well as All Might. And he once again tries to criticize All Might in this moment by saying that the light inside of him has faded, but yet All Might still has enough power and strength to wrap his tail around All-For-One in this moment and use the Shoto cannon, which is most likely equivalent to a flamethrower, inside of All-For-One's mouth, letting it go ablaze and doing damage to him. And as we have this, All Might is giving this monologue about how when it comes to people that they are like flickers, and that when one light goes out, it will appear inside someone else because that's how the passing of the torch is pretty much done. And as he is saying this, we actually finally transition over to a fight that, at least me personally, have been looking forward to for a while. And that is the fight between Aoyama versus Kunieda, where we get a better understanding of how Kunieda's quirk works, which is pretty much that he's able to control plant life that blooms from human flesh. And it pretty much saps the energy and nutrients from a person. A flower grows from that person, and depending on how big it is, it's able to create more flowers, which is able to attack more people and create more flowers. And from here, we get a little bit better understanding of what Aoyama had to deal with when it came to Kunieda, and how among the 32 heroes that were stationed here to get rid of the rest of the villains, that all of them got eliminated, including Fat Gum, around the same time and area where all of the heroes and the villains were separated initially. And we see that this quirk very much heavily goes against the ability for Fat Gum to use his quirk, which creates a bigger flower, which actually makes Kunieda stronger. And in this moment, Kunieda is just ridiculing Aoyama to every point that he can, calling him a filthy traitor, literally taking away his support item that allows him to be able to concentrate his laser effectively instead of it now just shooting off willy-nilly without his control. And how he gets stronger, Aoyama gets weaker, and how he's basically a puppet and he has a useless quirk, and how he believes that his life is pitiful. However, Aoyama does not take that down, and he brings a callback to what he says at the beginning of the fight, which is merci, which is thank you, because what he's saying right now is that everything that Kunieda has done and said to him at the beginning of this fight is just more fuel to the fire, lighting up his ambitions, his belief, his dreams, to allow him to continue to shine brighter and fight on. And this ties into what All Might is saying about passing on the light even if it fades, because what that light really represents is a whole bunch of things. It could represent ambition, it could represent willpower, it could represent the beliefs that you have, being useful to others. It can represent all of these good aspects, and all of these aspects literally being both metaphorical and physical light, as Aoyama blasts out multiple lasers coming out of his navel, none of them hitting Kunieda head on, except we get another character that many people predicted was in the area of Aoyama. Hagakure, Invisible Girl, coming in with her ability to bend light, where we get to see her form once again and lands a critical hit on Kunieda. And as that is happening, All Might is continuing his speech about how they will illuminate the dark and keep shining, allowing me to light the fire inside of me again, as we see another image of the shriveled up All Might inside beginning to stand up, continuing to fight. And at the end of this chapter, we see the device that All Might wanted to bring over to his location using the anima drones, as he says that you need to remember this name, All-For-One, as the chapter ends with "Can't Stop Twinkling," with a giant laser firing into the location of where All Might and All-For-One is. End of chapter. And unfortunately, this is going to be the last chapter that we're going to get for the next few weeks, because My Hero Academia is going to go on break, as well as a lot of other issues in Shonen Jump, but most likely than not, this is due to the fact that we are approaching the 400th chapter of My Hero Academia, so Horikoshi is probably going to need a lot more time to really polish up that final chapter. But overall, I really did enjoy this chapter, because this entire chapter really had a general theme of generational inheritance, and how even though All Might, which most likely his story is pretty much portraying how he goes from the symbol of peace to a shell of his former self because he no longer has that light inside of him, but how his observation of the next generation really sparked that fire inside of him, if not literally, very much figuratively. as we see that someone who literally embodies light, even though he views himself as being in the darkness, is still also able to shine bright. And if someone like Aoyama can go from the darkness into the light and continue to fight on, then so can a character like All Might. So there's a lot of thematic resonance between what happened with the fight between Aoyama and Kunieda and what is happening in the current fight between All For One as well as All Might, which may be the explanation for why we didn't get this fight sooner, just due to the fact how tightly tied it is to the themes within this fight of All For One versus All Might. The difference in how they believe generations should live on in the future, and how All For One believes that the future cannot be entrusted with anyone except himself, while All Might is literally entrusting the future to the next generation, as well as the connections that Aoyama has with both All For One with the darkness, but as well as All Might with the light. And how Aoyama has become an individual who embodies the ideals now left to him by All Might, as well as Hagakure, as well as the rest of the students. And how All Might himself is now embodying the ideals that he imparted into his students within this fight. So overall, I just really did enjoy this chapter and how it connects to the bigger themes of My Hero Academia when it comes to generational inheritance, light versus darkness, and basically the idea that just because you seem to be powerless doesn't mean that you cannot act and still be heroic. And what I think is going to be happening next chapter is that potentially we're going to get the conclusion between the fight between All Might and All For One, or at least have a very impactful climax to it, where we're potentially going to get even more of the student's abilities seen through Suit, maybe even Bakugo's as well, and how it's going to accumulate most likely in the defeat of All For One or the death of All Might. We just have to wait and make sure what's going to happen. But yeah, that's all I really have to say on this chapter. If there's anything that I missed or anything that you caught that I didn't, why not leave a comment down below explaining what you saw, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit that notification bell to be notified for whenever I upload more content like this. Do all that cool jazz, and hopefully I'll be able to catch you in my next video. Goodbye!